All right, so I did want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're talking about state level advocacy, and we're focusing on the remarkable work that is done out in Texas with the Texas Strike Force. And so we're going to dive into kind of the intricacies of state level advocacy and exploring how the different legislative processes shape the advocacy efforts and how organizations like the Texas Strike Force navigate these landscapes to drive meaningful change. And so joining us, we have some really great guests who will provide some insights into the workings, challenges, and successes of the Texas Strike Force. And so I'm going to throw it over to them to introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Vanita.
Right as I was going to go do something else. Hi everybody. Vanita right here. She, her, aya pronouns. I live in Houston, Texas. I'm a PWN member, former co-director of PWN, but more importantly, I live in Houston. I'm a member of the HIV community here. Should I pop it or just?
Tana, I'll throw it to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tana Pradia, she, her, hers. I am one of PWN Greater Houston co-chairs, but also one of the co-founders and member of the Strike Force.
Thank you. Elena?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Ferguson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the policy specialist at PWN, and I live in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. Michael Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone. Michael Elizabeth here, they, them pronouns. I'm the public health policy strategist here at Equality Federation. What's probably most important to know is I'm a person of lived experience, and I'm a proud Texas Strike Force member and was part of the inaugural Positive Organizing Project Plus class with Tana at the time, led by Benita Ray. So this is another full circle moment, and happy to talk about how all of this happened.
Awesome. And Deborah?
Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Somoe. I live in Houston, Texas. I'm the secretary for PWN Greater Houston area and a member of the Texas Strike Force.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. My name is Deasia Lee. I'm the director of Act Now End AIDS Coalition, and I'm so excited about this conversation today, and I'm ready to dive right in. And so I want to start with you, Vanita, to let us know what was the vision and what was the purpose of the Texas Strike Force, and how did that impact its startup?
Yeah, mute
Oh, yes. People do that, and I'll be like, how do you not see you muted? Well, now I know. I really thank you, Deasia, for putting together this webinar to talk about this. Seeing these other faces on this screen really take me back, in particular, Jaron even being here, because long before there was ever a strike force, it's you know, people ask me what I do, and I sometimes call it community building, you know, and it's taking one thing and how do you develop a resource or infrastructure that allows you to build the next. And so the Texas Strike Force was part of that, which is something that began probably by me in 2016 with Jaron's help and a bunch of folks' help when we decided to do an ending the epidemic plan for the city of Houston using this racial justice intersectional approach. And I got in the middle of it, kind of using standard kind of principles everybody used, treatment prevention, realized this shit is not gonna work. We're doing this now. Y'all been doing this forever. Something needs to be different, but I didn't quite know what that was. And so Housing Works helped, Jaron and Charles and stuff helped. We got through it, but it started, a couple things happened there. I started realizing how much I didn't know and what we needed to, you know, explore more around this intersectional racial. Why, if y'all got all the tools, we ain't ended it. What's wrong with that picture? Secondly, one cornerstone, because I'm a woman living with HIV, and some of the work that's that led me to do this in 2016 started in 2014 when we got funding to do a leadership development program for people living with HIV, which is where Tana comes from, Mike comes from, and so many of the other leaders. So from that class, we started in 2014, and Michael being one of the folks who helped me create the vision and idea for the POP program that we led with a $40,000 investment from Age United, 20,000 that went to Legacy and 20 to me for a whole year of pay, you know, but and Mike also was in the first class, but that class led to the building of a leadership community of folks living with HIV that eventually, when I was spotting those women who were going to be in those classes, and then they stayed on to help with the next class and the next class. And finally, some of those women, then I began organizing to start the PWN chapter. And they took off and running with that. But we really ground this idea that formations in power needed to be built by people with lived experience along the way. No ending epidemic plan could happen up here, even though most of our agencies in the city of Houston weren't even, they all spoke proud of the plan we had called the roadmap, but no one put money behind it or bought into it. And probably the only things that I could really push was this community, the community building aspect. And so we went from 2014, then 2016 with our EHE plan. And then in 2019, as the deputy director or co-executive director of PWN, thought, how do we get more folks involved with state level advocacy? Because that's just another power building component. We were already doing it at the city level by serving in different ways. Tana became chair of the Ryan White Planning Council. Another POP graduate became chair of the Ryan White Plan. We were getting they were working and getting our planning council to stop using stigmatizing language, because I was able to get a grant to pay them to go give presentations. So it was part of a process. And in 2019, the idea came up because here's legislative session coming up again. We've got these folks who, if we can take a moment to teach people and give them ownership, people will do, and which they were doing. And we were finding ways for folks to pay themselves to do it. We came up with the Texas Strike Force because every 2 years I've been involved in criminalization for a while. I have to watch this legislature and sit on pins and needles for all these things. And we realized, how can we get more folks involved at the legislative advocacy table? And one of the POP members had mentioned the Strike Force as a name for something else we were doing. And I just thought, this is it. And we went to the community and said, this is the importance of your state government. We need a mechanism to educate, train, and then mobilize to create progressive policies. So training is just as important component of the strike force as mobilization is. You know, taking the time to, and then I was able to get a little grant where we could pay something I formed called the Rapid Response Team. And what I also did was, and Mike was first there, Mike and Fran Watson, we presented to the community the importance of state legislative action and how they could get involved in different ways, and gave the community different ways. Do you only want to be consulted when we need action? Are you willing to help with bill summaries? Or were you willing to go to public testimony? Because this idea of giving folks different levels of engagement, we got to remember, everybody ain't gonna do it all, but how can we utilize people? So we kind of introduced that. It never took off, but this idea, but the first year it was like me, people signing up and starting to have meetings, and then beginning to train a rapid response team, because the legislative session in Texas is only 150 days. So you don't have a lot of time to act. So this idea, I even came up with this idea of a rapid response team that I would pay and teach how to utilize the state website, how to find the committees, how to find the bills, how to monitor bills. And so, and I trained them, and we used to check in 3 times a week. And then we began to, when the first year we monitored 32 bills and wrote summaries around topics and subjects that they thought were important, just learning. The 2 years later, 2021, I think we monitored 6 bills and actually took action on and was able to kill a criminalization bill and all this stuff. So the movement needed to be slow for the community to stay with it, and for education to continue, and for it to evolve and reach out to other groups. One of the things we didn't foresee, which is a good thing, there's been several other groups where our chapter, our PWN chapter, is doing integrated voter engagement, and the strike force now is a legislative piece of that, but all the pieces aren't connected the way they should be later. I mean, now, but they will be. So the best way I could say it is it continues, but the ground force is you ground it with people of lived experience who are in the lead. Others can join, but who do the talking and where power is vested. Secondly, you educate and train, and you move at the speed of trust with community. So, I want to come out today and change law in 2 years. That may not be the speed of trust with that community.
Right.
So even I have stepped back from the strike force in the last year or so because it needs to grow without me. It can't depend on it's its own thing. I'm over here looking like a little mommy, but I don't.
And Vanita, you bring up a great point. You talk about, educating, training, and mobilizing. And I really want to dive into so you brought up PWN a couple of times, and I really want to dive into, and this question is for you, Elena, what role does PWN play in the strike force's development oversight? And how can PWN support, other states, and other chapters in implementing something similar? Is there anything you learned from the work you do in Houston and in Texas that, can be shared with those other chapters?
Yeah. I guess I can speak more to my own experience working with the strike force. I'm a new Houstonian, so I've only lived here for about a year, so I've only been working with the strike force for about a year. But I guess I see my own role within the strike force as the policy lead. So what that kind of looks like practically is just kind of helping the strike force work through these complex policy issues that we encounter and regularly. So that can look through our administrative advocacy work around dishes and medication access, or it can look like the stuff we do around HIV criminalization or abortion criminalization, all these kind of complex policy issues. I kind of see my role as helping break down these issues so the strike force has a good sense before we get into all the mobilization, all of that stuff. So I also I've kind of taken Vanita's baby in the rapid response team, and I now co-lead that. So getting to work with our strike force members each legislative session. I know we're off this year, but we'll be back up and running in 2025. Just working with our strike force members to still do a lot of the things that Vanita did with them all those years ago in terms of getting comfortable with bills and the Texas legislature website and learning how to read bill language and kind of really helping our strike force members who are on the rapid response team to condense that information so they can then present it to the rest of the strike force and can have these necessary discussions and figure out what and how we're going to mobilize on these policy issues that are being introduced in the legislature. As far as how we can translate this to some of our other PWN chapters or just other, I think in particular southern states where the political realities are challenging, we'll say. I think it's a matter of recognizing the unique political realities of all of these states. Texas, is pretty tough, but it's different from Pennsylvania or South Carolina. So I think that's a big step in terms of grounding. If we wanted to recreate or use the strike force as a model, it would have to be grounded in the political reality and people of who live in that new state. I think the kind of model of education and mobilization and building up the leadership of people living with HIV in those new states, I think would still be imperative. And also just leaning on people who've done it before. If folks in South Carolina did want to start a strike force, opening ourselves up as a Texas Strike Force to like help them out and like have these discussions and learn from each other and see kind of like what their vision is and how we can assist. Like, I think always keeping like those lines of communication, I think would also be pretty important in terms of replicating the work.
Thank you, Elena. And both you and Vanita have made reference to something you was like the political reality of the state. And so as you talk about the political reality of Texas, that involves like, you know, because you mentioned like 2 years. And so, Michael, I want you to tell us like, what is the legislative process in Texas? And, you know, what is that structure and how does it impact the work of advocates and advocacy groups like the Texas Strike Force?
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry, Tanya, I see you off mute. Did you wanna, okay. Thank you for that. And Benita and Elena definitely touched on this a little bit, but Texas legislature only meets, only have the regular session every other year, meaning that's once every 2 years, which limits the window for advocacy groups to push for policy changes. This does require strategic planning and long-term engagement because most of the advocacy work should happen before the legislative session even starts. As it's already been insinuated, it is a very short session length compared to other states. In Texas, we only have 140 days maximum for the session, usually through January through May. Advocacy groups like the Texas Strike Force must be efficient and targeted in its advocacy efforts because of that short window. And again, building those relationships and a plan of action with legislatures early before session starts is crucial and can make or break a legislative item or policy priority. You know, what is beautiful about the structure of the Texas legislature is that it's a very, and you know, the Equality Federation has the privilege of working with state partners across 45 different states. And I promise you, even though it's a short window, the Texas legislature is actually the most accessible, or at least more accessible compared to other states, meaning constituents can come to the hearings and provide testimonies during the hearings, can advocate for different positions on bills being considered during those hearings, both on the House and Senate side. In many states, you have to choose which chamber you can provide your testimony on. In some states, like in Oklahoma, they don't even give constituents access to provide testimonies. They only allow other lawmakers to provide testimonies. And so that is a beautiful thing about the Texas legislature, that it is very, very open and accessible compared to other states. Now, that being said, it does require you to have resources to go to Austin, to stay in Austin, to feed yourself in Austin, and to make sure you have a job or an employment that's understanding for you to take off, or as part of your job to do that. This might be a little controversial, but because of the short time frame and biannual session structure, so far grassroots advocacy groups and coalitions become dependent on more traditionally established organizations like FQHCs or other forms of relatively well-resourced C3s or C4s for sustainability and advocacy implementation, which can impact policy priorities the coalition would like to focus on, or otherwise left to their own limited resources, consequently limiting ability to engage on policies that we decide as people of lived experience. In my role here at Equality Federation, we are constantly exploring ways to additionally resource grassroots HIV advocacy opportunities like the Texas Strike Force. Like, for example, in 2023, we provided the Texas Strike Force with a small micro grant of $5,000 through our state partner at the time to help transport folks to the Capitol for hearings. And we were looking for other ways to help resource the Texas Strike Force in the future, preparing for the 2024 lead session. One final thing, because I know Deasia is very efficient with time. I do want to highlight what has already been said, the Republican-controlled legislature. Texas has a Republican majority, which can make it challenging to pass progressive legislation like the Texas Strike Force might try to champion that year, especially if they are overtly attached to communities that Republicans politicize, that includes LGBTQ+ communities and communities with the ability to give birth, for example. Consequently, the Texas Strike Force does a great job of building a multi-issue coalition that centers people living with HIV, and at times forces us to bridge relationships with partners that can find common ground with key legislatures. For example, during HIV Advocacy Day, the Texas Strike Force made sure everyone attended submitted their stance opposing an anti-trans bill that was being heard in the House that same day, adding over 70 HIV advocates and Texans to the opposition list of an anti-trans bill. This is the first time I've ever seen this in my career. Now, did the LGBTQ organizations do the same for us? No, but all our movements are a work in progress. The HIV Advocacy Day resolution was the only progressive resolution passed by the Senate and the House, to my knowledge. None of the LGBTQ specific resolutions passed that year, highlighting how effective a multi-issue with diverse partners can be with dealing with a far right and a Republican-led legislative body.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. And Tana, I want to pass it to you. You know, I think folks have made reference to, you know, the structure and the rapid response teams and things like that. So can you elaborate a little bit more about, you know, how the Texas Strike Force works as far as structure and function and what makes it successful? You know, you mentioned the legislative process is, you know, every other year. And so how does the Texas Strike Force work and how do you all stay effective with that kind of reality?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things, and I want people to understand that the Texas Strike Force is a statewide coalition of people living with HIV and our allies. Point blank. It is led by people living with HIV. So the structure of the strike force is we have a full body coalition of the strike force, but then we have committees. We have the voter engagement committee, we have the dishes committee, we have the infrastructure committee, and the ledge committee. All of these committees meet. And right now we've been off because we're not in session. But one of the things that we will start doing coming this December, before we start going into the lead session in January, is start talking about what trainings do we need? What trainings do our people need? And what that looks like. We need to have everything in place. Those are our goals, set up our purpose, our goals, and see what is most important for our community. But for the whole state of Texas, it is important that we do it with a unified front. Everyone's voices is being heard, but our voices are at the forefront. We don't leave anybody behind. And that is the way the strike force is successful. We still got a lot of work to do, but that is how it is successful. I'm not saying that it's not, we don't have challenges, because every coalition has challenges. But the Texas Strike Force, you know, when we show up, we make sure that our people have everything they need, from talking points to funds to get to do public testimony in Austin. We make sure our people are taken care of, but we make sure that our people have everything that they need to take action. That rapid response team plays a crucial role in the development of the mobilization on any issues that we are passionate about. For example, criminalization, decrim, reproductive rights, trans rights and justice, immigration, whatever the coalition decides we want to focus on, that's what we do. But we do it in a unified front. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And I want to bring Deborah into this because she is a part of a rapid response team. And so, Deborah, can you share any insights about, you know, what it's like to be a part of the rapid response team, what your training was like, you know, what the time commitment has been like if you're an active participant on the team? So can you like give us insight into that?
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me, Adisha. So for me, the sole purpose, before I start talking about the things that went into rapid response team, I would also like to state that because Texas Strike Force is a state coalition, is a wide state coalition based group. We sorry, the state coalition group. So we actually decided to look into issues that affect people living with HIV within the state. And as regards to that, we actually carve out a ham, which is a rapid response team from that group, because we wanted to be able to deal with those issues from the roots. And for us to deal with those issues from the roots, we have to start with the bills before they're actually being passed, because we have realized that over time, those issues, once they're being passed, it becomes more problem to actually start dealing with those issues. Because once a law has been made, then you start fighting for it to, for it not to affect people. But why don't we just cut the roots of the problem before it even becomes an issue? So, and that's why we have the response, RR, which is the response rapid response team. So what we do is we have training. For example, by the time, for example, this coming year around December, we usually have training about 4 to 5 hours. The training will be around the things that we need, which is usually how to, maybe, for example, if we have newbies joining us at that time, like, how to monitor the bills, how to write actions alert, how to even go on the website itself to even find the bills, all those things. And apart from that, we also inside the same team, we also have subgroups, because we want to deal with issues affecting people living with HIV. And we know that it's not just one issue that affect people living with HIV. So we actually divide each people in those groups, and we make it a subgroup, and each person have a partner, and we look for bills around those groups, those issues we want to deal with, And once we have those issues, we meet like every week to learn how to write the actions alert for those bills that we want to work on. We also get back to the community by through social media and everything. At the same time, we also have a unified communication, which we use through the Slack, for example. Since we meet every week, but for example, so many things can come up within the week before the next meeting. We have the Slack channel whereby everybody gets to see everything that is going on, or any changes that happens immediately within the within the state and everything. And from that, we can even decide to have a unified meeting immediately and start talking about it and everything. So, and apart from that, by after the training in December, by January to March, we usually have all these summaries. We deal with all these summaries. We deal with all these actions alert and everything. And the way the action alert work is this: once we have all those talking points ready, all those details ready, we actually put them in like an email format that also have a link where people can take action. So by the time the bills start, once the legislation session opens and they start talking about those bills and everything, before it even passes at all, before it even goes to the next level, we act immediately. We send it out. We send it out into the mails for people to take action within like 24 hours or so, and people take action. And so many, and this is not even a joke, because I've seen it live, where once we take those actions, those bills are not even able to fly anywhere, and they just crash right there. So I can now imagine when we don't have things like that in place, and I really realized that if we had something like this in place so many long time ago, and so many other states have it, so many issues criminalizing people even with HIV right now will not even be happening in the first place. So and by the month of March, we are coming together as a team again, and we're talking about how to go to the next phase, which is going to the capital, giving testimonial during HIV Advocacy Day and everything. How to we have our talking points already. We rehearse all these things, and don't forget that for us to even go to Austin, like maybe we might be going in hundreds, and people are coming from all over different parts of Texas. And all these things also need funding for us to even do this thing. But trust me, we only have to deal with people or work with people that share the same interest with us. People that don't share the same interest with us that might want to say, okay, we will fund your activity, but you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. We rather not work with those people and everything. So we bring all these people in place. We get the funding and we go to Austin and we do this, we present our talking points to our legislatures and everything. And when we come back, we usually have a debrief. And at that time, we were already ending the legislative session, and we're all coming together as a team, talking about what we did right, what we need to improve on the next time, what will be our next plan, what will be the next phase, and everything. And that's how we work. And don't forget that even though the legislation session for Texas is only once in 2 years, that doesn't mean that after that period we're not still doing anything. Elena here, every time any bill is being passed, anytime anything comes up, she's sending it to everybody to look at, to see, and for us to like talk about it, we deliberate about it and everything. And from there, we'll still, then we can take something like that back to Texas Strike Force as a state coalition now, and we talk about it. We look for how to move forward. Then that's when different groups, which is like the dishes group, the infrastructural group, and everything. Any of these places that those issues are falling into, then we start addressing. If we need to meet with ARSA, we start writing to ARSA. If we need to move to talk to any other person that those issues are affecting, any other body or agencies, we start talking to all of them. And so that's what we do all year round in Texas Strike Force. When we don't have those sessions going on, we don't just sit around or just talk about we do serious business. Trust me.
Also, no, I absolutely hear you. And and you just talked about how you all kind of debrief after after the year of doing the work. And so you talk about what went well and what didn't. And so Vanita, I have a question for you. In the early days, what was some initial challenges of implementing the strike force, particularly those that you didn't anticipate, and how were they addressed?
Oh my goodness. Finding the balance between needing to do something now we got to start here with people's ability to commit time, because these things, there are people out there that this is their, livelihood, but most of the community members, they're doing this in their own time. So, and people's access to technology, all of that comes into play. And that's why it's really important to find multiple ways that people can participate so folks don't feel left out because they can't do this one. So I think this moving at the speed of trust, kind of building it as you go and trying to move with the community, I think those are hard. And then finding dollars that help support some of the community members' really important work. Others may want to do this, but we're already tapped. We're being assaulted right here and hit right here. And so how do you do something? And I think what PWN is learning, because people, Elena is learning, I put a whole bunch of time into this. That was my whole extra time. Normal PWN staff, which is a national organization, can't put what the hours that I put into the strike force because it was a personal thing to me. So how do you balance that? That's why if another state wants to do this, I say they need to make sure they have a strong external partner. Forget health departments. This don't need to be in the health department anyway, because organizations come with their own values that sometimes overtake communities. And for you to keep building and have legitimacy, you've got to center the communities, and balance with this resource need. So I think that money, that ability to reach people, that ability to show change. When the one time we fought hard on a bill, only to get down to the last few minutes, and then they declared an emergency, and where they got to not have to give 72 hours notice, so we couldn't get in to testify. And, sometimes after this, you could be bowled over. A couple of years ago, we were trying to keep, working on criminalization, whatever, but they got the voting, the voter suppression passed you, and because they introduced it in both houses, both chambers at the same time. So you just can't fight them all. And how do you keep morale up to saying, we did win this, or we did do this? And that's why, and then really prioritizing, because you can't do it all. And so administrative advocacy is one of the areas we've had real success. But I think those are some of the issues. We're not talking about a funded organization with staff. We're talking about people who care and want to fight, and how do we engage others and make the space more inclusive by offering different languages, and making sure our trans folks know we're addressing their issues. And so it's got to evolve, but those are some of the, I think, immediate kinds of needs.
And thank you so much for that. And yeah, you did mention PWN and Elena. I'm wondering, like, can you shed any light about the logistics of like what support PWN provides to the strike force? Like, how are resources allocated or distributed across the state in Texas?
So
Yeah.
I probably,
Go ahead, Benita.
okay, I probably can talk a little bit about that. So
Okay.
over time, so PWN has staff. So it was me before, it's Elena, and it's the organizing director, Crystal, but as a national organization, we're still trying to pay for those staff time. So over the years, we've applied for AIDS United Emergency Grant, urgent grant, which Simmons, a local foundation here that funded the strike force for 2 years. So that in addition, the chapter in Houston now works with another organization who some of their time is being supported through some integrated voter engagement work. But the way PWN, we've got to find a way to make the strike force more self-sustaining, and find a way to really routinize or get what Deborah was talking about, even more efficient in the way that they work. Because, you got to only watch a couple of bills, a couple issues, and mobilize on a couple things so that you can right size the capacity needs from PWN. I think the more they develop the infrastructure, organizational members could be bringing some of these resources to the table too. We got Prism, we got Legacy. Other organizational members could be bringing something to the table in terms of in-kind or not, and they just haven't done that. But PWN can only do so. They put 50% of my time was in Texas. That meant I was working an extra 50% somewhere else because my job was the whole thing. And Atlanta is balancing that too. And so, we've got some funding because PWN Texas is a part of Health Not Prisons, one of their models. And one of the reasons it gave us a chance to maybe develop another pilot, because the strike force was started to be replicable. So we thought others could use it. The same thing now, looking at a pilot for how do you deal with criminalization in the state who's repealed its criminalization law, and how that can be used. And so there's some resources being devoted to kind of use Texas as a model. So it's finding synergy with things like that, and they don't always exist. And so Elena is always probably doing this. I'm sorry, Elena, you could speak for yourself. I just wanted to give you a little help there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. No, because I can see how, really the strike force is very like volunteer led. I know PWN is an organization that devotes some staff time to that, but the folks who seem to be involved in the strike force are the folks that care and devote that extra time outside of, a job. And so, Tana, I have a question for you about can you share a success story or a positive change that, you can speak about that happened directly because of the strike force?
Yeah, we have had some success stories like in the end of 2021 going into 2022, we found out that 2,700 people were going to be kicked off of ADAP. And we rallied and we mobilized and we showed up at the Medication Advisory Committee. We showed up at DISH's community meetings. We made sure our people had talking points and everything. But what surprised them was how the strike force mobilized. And they had that 2,700 people, they had to put back on that program. because the strike force mobilized in a way, it is about us. It is not about necessarily you need to make a cut, but you don't give community no notice and we're supposed to take it and lie down. No, that's not who we are. And for me personally, it is personal for me because let me tell you, when Vanita first bought the rapid response team, getting up at 9 o'clock, 3 days a week in the morning to meet and develop and be trained to learn, we did that. And it is personal for a lot of us. It is a passion, it is a commitment for the communities across Texas, because we're not just talking about Houston, we're talking about Dallas, Fort Worth, Tarrant County, we talking about Austin, we talking about San Antonio, we talking about El Paso, we're talking about the whole state of Texas. And we don't believe that any of us, we are human beings. We need to be treated like human beings. We don't want to be treated any other way. We go through enough stigma and discrimination to last us a lifetime. And everybody that is a part of the strike force, from people living to living with HIV and our allies, we fight this battle together. It's a commitment, but it's a devotion. This is a family. It's more than just a coalition. And everybody thinks that they want to come in, take over the strike force. It will stay in the people living with HIV hands and not on their personal gain behind having a coalition like the Texas Strike Force. So we fight for our people.
That's very powerful, Tana. I love that. And so this question, before we like save questions for some of the participants, and this one is for all of you, is like, what advice would you give a jurisdiction? Would you give a state, a group who wants to start something like the Texas Strike Force? What advice would you give them? Anybody can start.
Well, personally for me, I feel any other state that wants to actually start a coalition like this, they first have to forget about personal gain. They have to be willing to do the work, like and not really expecting any financial rewards back. And instead they should be looking out for personal gain into the HIV community itself. Then if they have that mindset, and it will be easy for them to be able to run, and it will be like something that will be part of them that they won't be able to do without.
So I would add something even more to it. It needs to be started by the experts, and the experts are people living with HIV. We know what is best for our communities and our people. So it should always, whatever another state does, our replica is people living with HIV at the forefront. And that's the way the startup should be, because that's how the strike force started, with Vanita's vision that we are the experts and we are the ones that are living with HIV, and we know what issues are important to us and what we want to fight for. And it's a commitment.
I think I would say to sit down and really decide if you're willing to make a long-term commitment. This is not quick action. You can go run to the Capitol by yourself, but if you're trying to, the strike force is about building a community, new community, creation of a new community ecosystem, or building community infrastructure that supports change over time and builds its people at the same time. So if you're looking for something quick and you just want to change this one law, maybe a strike force, it could be that, you but it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. You can just bring the experts around the table. This is about building community. And so I think you got to decide, or you're in this for a quick thing that you need, or are you willing, are the folks really committed to building that community for this kind of transformation, not for a particular, one event thing. So, and if you are, then you can give yourself the time to make those mistakes and get yourself the time to bring community along with you, not leave community because we're trying to make this due date of next year and nobody knew about and we created by ourselves and then decided y'all should live with it. That will not create co-ownership, and that's what you're trying to get.
So I think this actually, I'm going to build off of what Vanita just said. Although I will say that it might be, it might sound like it's contradicting what they said, but it actually complements what they're saying. I would say even though the Texas Strike Force needs to be resourced to create a toolkit, not that the Texas Strike Force needs to create a toolkit, but we need the money and the resources and the people power to create one. Because it is very dependent on, outside of the PWN support, it is very dependent on free labor. I don't call it volunteerism. I call it free labor because that's what it is. Others, even though a toolkit does need to be created for others to be able to more easily adopt the best practices, you don't have to wait for it. And what I've learned is each state deserves its own process towards coalition development, as long as it's led by people of lived experiences, not just informed by people of lived experiences, but led by people of lived experience. Vanita built a strong foundation for what you see today in Texas. Not every state has a Vanita, and it takes several years to build the strong foundation we currently have, roughly 5 to 10 years actually, which is, as Vanita was saying, is way beyond the scope and timelines of most grant applications and of most immediate priorities. If you were listening to Vanita's comment and Tana's comment, it was multiple grants that contributed to what you see now. And they oftentimes were mini grants, small grants, etc. And this is the part that might sound like it's contradicting what they just said, but it doesn't, I promise you. So some coalitions may be targeted to a specific HIV issue, like HIV decriminalization, for example, with the goals of expanding to include multiple HIV policy priorities eventually. Some coalitions may just be EHE focused or municipal focused before expanding to a statewide policy influence. And that's okay too. Because I know that the HIV movement tends to operate from a speed of trust, I do want to warn folks that lawmakers won't. And if you stay ready, you won't have to get ready, which means HIV advocacy coalition work should be year-round, not start up and dissolve when state sessions start and end. But I do want to remind folks that because I feel like sometimes in HIV spaces, and it's well-meaning, but like we have to check all the boxes before we engage on specific issues. The lawmakers won't care if you're still in education mode. They still gonna try to pass this bill or operate from a place of ignorance. So there still needs to be some type of loose type of infrastructure, even if it's a close-knit group of 4 or 5 advocates who are well-informed on alleged policies or processes. To help engage on those things, even if you're still in the foundational phase of your coalition development.
And if I could just add on to
I
that.
would totally agree with everything you just said, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I guess I would just say, like, if you were interested in starting like a strike force-esque entity, I guess I would say just like have a good sense of like the cross movement opportunities available to you. Like, we don't do this work in a silo. As a strike force, our work is connected to so many other folks who are doing great movement work across the state. And so we kind of operate with that understanding. And it's important to kind of build those relationships with other folks who are also kind of trying to get to the root, like Deborah was saying earlier, like just maybe doing it in a different way or like focusing on a different like specific issue, but you are value aligned with them and you can kind of learn from each other and lean on each other. So definitely like taking stock of like who could be some like vital movement partners that could help you along the way, I would say.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our panelists actually for sharing their insights
I have
about.
my hand up because I wanted to,
Yeah.
that's a short thing. I am a Texas Strike Force member. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I learn and bring back what I learned from Texas to our Maryland, all the Maryland, but mostly the Maryland Coalition to Decrim HIV. So Maryland didn't take time to do that. I found an avenue here, and I'm taking what I learned. I use it in Texas. I'm on the rapid response team, but I bring what I've gained back to Maryland and trying to do something there. So thank you, Vanita. Thank you, Tana. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Mike Elizabeth. Thank you, Elena. And let me see, do I see anybody else on it? No.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hey, this is Jaron. I did have a question, but it was probably better for maybe 20 minutes ago. I wanted to know, like in off years like this year, like is the strike force mainly focused on infrastructure, or are you like doing things at the county commissioner level, or what? Like what's your game look like? I'm curious.
Can I say what the way that I suggested, because what they just said isn't what I would suggest, but that in 2019, we only met in the legislative year. If folks was learning, let them off to 2021. Then we start meeting every year, showing folks the value of strategy and infrastructure development in the off year, or developing champions, whatever. So I'm not, now what I just heard folks saying, I just need to get that out. So whatever they're doing now, but the off year, and again, people are tired, so you may not can get everybody, but you should be using that off year for that strategy development when it's possible.
Thanks very much, Benita. That pretty much answered the question.
But that doesn't mean that's necessarily what they're doing, but they are strategizing this year and stuff. And really, how do we build those champions, covert and overt champions? Because remember, some people champion stuff, but they don't want to be open about it. How do we build that? So, and how do you learn about your legislator? The off years are a great time.
This is Deborah. So to add to that, I would say that so part of the things we do, like I said earlier, was issues that are arising in the community, we still bring it back to Texas Strike Force. For example, things that happen, like Elena is a policy person. She sees them. She bring them to Slack. We talk about it. Then we address it in the next Texas Strike Force meeting. And just that, for example, wherever the issues are facing, if it's facing infrastructure, then it will be the call of the infrastructure committee, to work on it and bring the reports back to the Texas Strike Force as a whole. If it is talking about, if the issues is about dishes and everything, like medication advisory and everything, then we that committee will be working on it and bring the report back to the Texas Strike Force as a group, and we talk about it, and other members and allies can now bring in their input and agree or disagree, and there we move forward. And that is what we do all year round. We keep monitoring issues that are arising, that has to do with people living with HIV.
Absolutely, Deborah. I can add this to it. Each committee that is a part of the strike force, like Deborah's saying, each committee works, but each committee does not move without a consensus. And it must come back to the strike force, to the full coalition. So nothing those committees does, we don't make any decisions in those committees. That's where we just do the work, bring it back to the strike force, and decide from there as a coalition what issues we will work on.
And like I said earlier, initially, all these community committee groups, we didn't have them initially, and that was why when I started talking to you earlier, Delisha, I said that we have not moved away from the initial purpose of Strike Force. I said we're actually building on it. So like when we started and everything, we didn't have those subcommittees. We just do our meetings, we just talk about things, but we looked for, every time we strive to work better and smarter and everything. And that was how we came about the subgroups and everything. And when these subgroups happened, we realized that it's easier for us to be able to deal with so many issues that are arising at the same time, because we have different people working on different on different issues and bringing it back to the house, and we're able to tackle it than just everybody trying to do the same thing at the same time.
Thank you so much. Were there any questions? I also checked the chat just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Well, we are pretty much at time, so I just want to thank all the panelists for sharing their insights into state level advocacy and the impactful work of the Texas Strike Force. And, you know, I'll be talking to you all soon as we discuss, like, we definitely want to see this grow and take off in other states. And I'm very, very grateful for all of you for sharing your expertise and your experience here today. You know, and even me personally, I've learned so much, you know, from this discussion from all of you. And I'm like pledging to do my part back here at home to really see change here in my state as well. So thank you so much.
We'd love to see Ania under your leadership, Deasia. So thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Take care, all.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
so much. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.